Ready to break up with your bullshit? I mean, all those excuses that are keeping you stuck. Because you have one life to live. And if you're not having fun yet, then that's a problem, dude. Welcome to Goals, Grit, and Some Woo-Woo Shit. The podcast where you learn about the habits of kicking ass at life. Whether you want to get ripped, get rich, or just get high on life, this is the place to be. Here's your host, best-selling author and feel-good expert, Una Duncan.
Hey you, I am so happy to be back here with you talking about goals, grit, and some woo-woo shit. Because although you might think we just hung out with last week's episode, the truth is that I recorded that months ago, and I haven't been at my microphone, at my desk, or at my computer for a long time. I've actually been traveling around Europe with my family, my husband and my two boys who are 11 and 13 years old. And when I tell people this, it tends to bring up some questions like, what about school? Or where did you stay? And I suspect some unspoken questions like, how the fuck did you afford that? So today, I want to talk about the goal of extended travel with your family. And I'm going to answer all of those questions just in case you have ever thought, man, I'd love to hit the road with my family, but I can't because of ABC. I'm sure I've told you this before, but one of my favorite coaching exercises to do with my clients is, first, think of one thing that you want more than anything. And then the second thing is, what is the reason you haven't already done that? And the answer will probably come in like a millisecond, like so quickly you don't even question it. That is your limiting belief. Step 4 is finding at least one example that kind of pokes a little hole of doubt in that belief. And that hole of doubt creates just this little sliver of possibility. Maybe the reason I think I can't do that thing isn't as solid as I thought. So for example, often I'll hear, oh, yeah, I wish I could be in top physical condition. Well, why can't you? Oh, God, I'm too old. Well, Diana Nyad swam from Cuba to Florida when she was 64 years old. So is it possible that you might be able to train your adult body to do 20 push-ups from your toes, to have muscle definition, to run a marathon? It's probably possible. And then here's the fun part. You're going to hear your brain immediately go, yeah, but I have bad knees. And notice how quickly it comes. Notice how frantic your brain is to defend your position of your comfort zone where you don't have to do that thing. And then if you've got the bravery, you might unpeel the next layer of the onion and question the next belief. You might think, okay, I got bad knees, but if I Google it, then there's David Goggins who ran 100 miles on broken bones. And I am not recommending doing that. And I am not saying you have to swim from Cuba to Florida. I am saying that if you want something for your one and only beautiful life on this planet, and you have an automatic, unquestioned belief about why you can't have it, you might want to shine a light on that limiting belief and ask yourself, is that actually true? So in telling you about my traveling adventures, I'm just hoping to poke a little hole of doubt if you have ever told yourself you'd love to travel, but you can't. So let me just start with the big one. I can't afford it. First of all, dude, don't say I can't afford it. I just want you to eliminate that language from your vocabulary because it is so disempowering. Instead, replace that thought with, that's not how I choose to spend my money right now. That way, you're not telling yourself, oh, I'm a victim, I don't have money. You're telling yourself, I do have money, and I am someone who makes savvy financial decisions with it. And since I'm sure that you are someone who makes savvy financial decisions, you might have, at some point in your life, added up the costs of flights and hotels and doggy daycare and unpaid time off and thought, oh, hell no, I will not be taking that massive trip anytime soon. So here's the thing. There is a chance that extended travel isn't actually as expensive as you think it is. So let's start with accommodations. For most of our trips, we have used homeexchange.com, which is a service that's exactly what it sounds like. You just swap homes with someone. And you can do what's called a reciprocal exchange, where you and a family from Australia or whatever just like live in each other's houses at the same time. And you can even swap cars and all that sort of stuff. Or you can do what's called a guest points exchange, which is what we would normally do because, let's be honest, it's hard to lure people to Canada in the dead of winter unless they're skiing. And that's when we want to get the hell out of Dodge and go south. So a few years ago, for example, we spent our summer going on road trips and camping. And then we'd have people come and stay at our apartment in Toronto, in the summer when it's super popular. We've got Pride and festivals and all that kind of stuff. And then when winter rolled around, we had all these guest points to use, and we used them to stay at this spectacular place in San Miguel de Allende in Mexico. And dude, here's the thing. Sometimes these exchanges are an unbelievable value. That place in Mexico was like 3 bedrooms that had this absurd TV the size of like an IMAX theater and a pool and a huge deck. And the exchange included cleaning services that would leave us bouquets of beautiful fresh flowers. It was ridiculous and quite an upgrade for us. In London, England, we used our guest points from our small 2-bedroom apartment in Toronto to stay at a massive 4-story Georgian mansion right in central London. And the only request was that we water their bonsai trees while they're gone. Right? We also stayed in a really cool house in the suburbs of Amsterdam, and the exchange included the use of their bikes, which we used to get around. And they had this big backyard for the kids and lots of toys, which is a huge advantage of exchanging with other families because they tend to have the stuff that families want. Another cool experience was in Marseille, France. The neighbors came over to introduce themselves to the Canadians staying at their friend's place, and they invited us to dinner, which was such a cool experience. So listen, if you have a place to exchange, check out homeexchange.com. I'm not affiliated with them or anything. I'm just a huge fan. And even if you don't have a place to exchange, but you're open to looking after people's dogs and donkeys and whatever, check out petsitter.com, which is similar. You just stay at their house and you look after their pets. Okay. So let's talk about flights. So you probably know that there are a million travel hacks where you have a dozen credit cards and you get the bonus welcome points and you pay for your whole life on your credit card and basically you just live in first class for the rest of your life. I am not an expert at that. And to be honest, those perks are not as perky for Canadian credit cards. But if you want to hack that system, the best place to look is thepointsguy.com for Americans, or Canadians, check out princeoftravel.com. So to be honest, I don't do any of that. Probably because I'm just too lazy to figure out, but also because one of my financially savvy decisions is I pay for everything with my Wealth Simple Cash card. It's like a prepaid credit card. So it is impossible for me to spend more than I have in cash. And that card, by the way, pays you 5% interest on your balance. So that's one of my financially savvy decisions. Again, not affiliated, just what I do. Okay, so I don't do the points thing. I just buy my flights like a regular schlub, but I don't mind because the flights are not as expensive as you think they are. So for example, let's play a little game. Guess how much the flights were for this last trip that we took. We flew, so add this up in your mind. We flew from Vancouver to Toronto, Toronto to Dublin, Ireland, Dublin to Venice, Italy, Naples, Italy to Marrakesh in Morocco, and then Marrakesh to Malaga, Spain. So what would be your guess of, for one person, what all of that cost for flights? It was $530 Canadian each, which is, probably way less than you'd expect, right? And that's not me doing anything fancy. I was just looking at Google Flights, trying to find the best deals in the month that we were traveling in and being flexible by a day or two. Okay, so now, but before we move on from the I can't afford it objection, I have to admit, I'm really lucky. I can bring my job with me wherever I go. It's amazing. And I understand that travel gets a little financially less appealing if you stop getting paid the minute you don't show up to the office. But I will say that on my travels, I have met tons of people with traditional jobs who found a way to make it work. They negotiated with their bosses to work from abroad, or they banked time for a sabbatical year. If your limiting belief is, I can't travel because I'm a teacher, for example, it's worth asking, are there any examples of teachers who have figured out how to do this? And I'm guessing you will find some who did. Now, one bonus tip, if you are going to be working while traveling, try and stay within a time zone or two of your usual. So travel north-south, not east-west. That way you don't have to take meetings at ungodly hours or have like a 24-hour turnaround before getting responses from colleagues who are sleeping when you're working. Let me tell you something. It's a bit of a vibe wrecker. If you've just finished watching the sunset over the Mediterranean and you're about to tuck yourself into bed, and then all of these work emails and notifications start flooding in because North America just woke up. It's not the end of the world because after all, you just finished watching the sunset over the Mediterranean, so you are awesome. But if it's your first time working from abroad, just make it easy on yourself and think north-south. Okay. Now, let's tackle the next big question that I hear from people. The kids. You know, The Simpsons, when the preacher's wife is all like, oh, someone think of the children. So the first question that a lot of people have is, well, what about school? So the answer to that depends on the kind of traveling you want to do. And it also depends on what you want for your kids' education. So, for example, is it most important that they just become lifelong learners and learn as much as they can and be prepared for life? Or is it important that they integrate back into your home school system? Or is it important that they socialize with other kids? Or is it also important that they get out of your hair during the day so that you can focus on your work? Or is it important that they prepare for university and higher education? So depending on your answers to those questions, there is always a solution on how you travel and how you can make sure that your kids are getting exactly the kind of education you want. So for example, if you want to bounce around a little bit, dude, there are so many super cool, progressive online learning programs. And some of those follow traditional school curriculums and some of them don't. There's also really cool hybrid options where they're doing some learning online and then they meet up with their teacher and their classmates every couple of months or so. Or if you're like, no, I'd prefer my kids weren't online all day. There's even groups of families that roam around together with a teacher and the kids get schooled during the day and the parents are working and they all travel around together. Or if you want to go somewhere and stay put for a little while, you could put your kids into a local school. There are international schools in major hubs all over the world. So if you want your kids to get educated in English with a homeschool curriculum, you can probably do that in Bali or wherever you want to go. Those tend to be private, usually a little fancy. So, you just got a budget for that. Or you could just put them in a local public school if you wanted them to really integrate into the local culture. Our sons went to a local school for a little bit in Costa Rica and again in Mexico. But usually, to be honest, we just use the trip as a learning experience. And it is unbelievable how much the kids learn. Of course, they learn a little bit of language, geography. They learn the history. They learn about the religion. They learn math because they're doing currency conversions. They learn about geopolitics because they're learning about the relationships with the nearby countries. They learn biology as they're playing with, foreign landscapes and animals. And on this past trip, my kids also learned tons about Renaissance art, mythology. We did a cooking class at a farm and they learned all about agriculture. They rode mountain bikes on like lava in Iceland. And we did a truffle hunt in the woods in Tuscany. And they did a gladiator combat class in Rome, which is like amazing mix of history and gym class. And they wrote their names in Arabic in the sand in the Sahara Desert. And I know all that sounds like bragging kind of, but what I'm trying to convey to you is that no, it's not the same stuff they would have learned in school, but it's definitely learning. And we will also challenge them to do things like, okay, kids, we want to go to the Colosseum. Now it's up to you guys to use Google Maps to get us to the subway and then navigate the Rome subway system to get us there. And if you get stuck, you have to ask someone for help in Italian. And then, we'd make a game out of it. We'd say, if you get us there by 3 p.m., you can have 30 extra minutes of video game time tonight or whatever. So what I'm saying is there's tons of opportunities to just prepare your kids for life. And also on this trip, it was also really important for us to be able to integrate back into our homeschools. So we also had assignments from their teachers. For example, Buddy is in grade 6 and he had to keep a journal of his travels and he had to learn certain units in math. Felix is in grade 8 and he also had to write some short stories. He had to do a unit on poetry. He had to keep a record of his physical activity for phys ed, and he also had to learn certain units in math. So you might be surprised that fulfilling the requirements for your school's curriculum, it usually takes like a fraction of the time that kids actually spend in school back home. What I'm saying is that regardless of your intentions for your travel experience, and your priorities for your kids' education, there is a way. And if anything I just said here about educating your kids on the road sparked something in you, I strongly recommend an amazing book. It's called World Schooling by Ashley Dymuck. Or, dude, go to the World Schoolers Facebook group. It is a treasure trove of resources for any kind of learning that you can imagine. Okay. Finally, one niggling worry for my clients anyway is often how are they going to keep up with their healthy habits when they're on the road? If you've read my book, Healthy as Fuck, or if you're one of my clients in my Masters of Fitness Awesomeness program, You probably have a simple system of healthy habits that makes you feel really good in your body. And maybe you've seen some awesome results, and maybe you're afraid that you lose all that progress if you disrupt your whole life and hit the road. So here's what I want to say about that. First of all, I don't try to progress my fitness when I'm traveling. My focus is about maintaining the muscle and the cardiovascular fitness that I have and feeling good and having great energy to enjoy my travels. So I downshift into maintenance mode, and you can actually adjust your efforts pretty significantly while still maintaining your fitness. And if you want to know more about maintenance mode and why it's actually a really essential part of your fitness journey, check out episode 27 and I tell you all about that. But here's what maintenance mode looks like for me when I'm traveling. So for my workouts, I bring a resistance band, the kind with handles. If you've done any of my programs, they are all just using a resistance band, and it is the best piece of equipment you can have. It's super light and portable, and it's easy to adjust the amount of resistance. So you can have light resistance for, upper arm, body stuff, your shoulders or whatever. And you can have really heavy resistance for, say, your glutes. You can also change the direction of resistance. So you can pull, you can push, you can do all these things. You can make that little band into basically an entire gym if you know what you're doing. You can work every muscle in your body. And if you don't know what you're doing, I got you. I will leave a link in the show notes to some workouts for you that you can do anywhere in the world. And listen, if you are traveling for more than a month, I really would suggest bring a band. Don't just do body weight workouts, because although body weight workouts are awesome, you can only push your body weight against gravity. So you're not going to use any of your pull muscles. So what will happen is you'll tend to overtrain your anterior body and undertrain the posterior. So what that can look like is kind of slumpy posture, sore neck, tight hips, sore back, maybe a bit of a saggy bum. No big deal to leave your band at home if you're traveling for a couple of weeks. No big deal at all. But if you're going for a month or more, bring a band or some kind of fitness equipment. And listen, or if you're staying put for a little while, I have a friend who narrows down his accommodation options to ones that are only within walking distance of a gym. That is his first priority. And another thing that I do when I'm traveling solo, my favorite thing to do is fitness tourism. So I'll get to a city and I'll Google something like weirdest fitness classes in Chicago or whatever. And I will work my schedule around being able to attend the underwater spin class or the disco yoga in the park or whatever. My family wouldn't put up with that, but that is my solo travel indulgence. Okay. Now for food. I'm a plant-based eater, which kind of already drastically limits my food options when I'm traveling already. So to be honest, for me, it's usually just about finding something I can eat that's more than pasta and tomato sauce. For my fellow vegans and vegetarians, my favorite hack on this is the app Happy Cow, which will basically show you all the best vegan and vegetarian options in the vicinity of where you are. But if you don't have that, I've also had amazing luck just typing in vegetarian food, or even, guys, just even type in healthy food into Google Maps, and any local restaurants that have the words healthy or vegetarian, the reviews will come up and you'll be able to select your restaurant that way. Okay. Other than that, my only real food travel hack is that I will sometimes travel with oats and a baggie of protein powder. Word to the wise, label that shit so it does not get mistaken for drugs at the airport. And then when I get to the hotel room, I'll use the coffee machine to heat up some water, maybe mush a little banana in there from Starbucks or something. But really, my suggestion is just to approach your nutrition while traveling the same way you always would. When you get to a restaurant, look for the vegetables and try to order enough vegetables that they will be the bulk of your meal. And this is probably going to be challenging. You'll probably have to look at the sides or the salads. Then look for some protein and have a palm-sized amount of that. And then add a fist-sized amount of carbs. And that's where you might want to get mindful of portions. So for example, if you go to a North American restaurant and you order breakfast, you don't need the toast and the orange juice and the hash browns. For example, you might want to choose one of those for your carbohydrate serving. You might, or you might not. Dude, an extra serving of carbs here and there will not make or break your fitness results. What I don't want you to do, though, is slip into this mentality of YOLO, I'm traveling, so all bets are off. Because when you do that, A, You're telling yourself that your healthy habits are a chore and that it's a treat to pause them, which is going to lead to you wanting to pause them anytime you need or you want a treat, like when work is crazy or when you feel like you deserve it or whatever. Okay. B, you are eroding your identity as someone who just eats healthy no matter what. C, you probably have your regular healthy habits for a reason because they make you feel good. And of course, you want to feel good and be your awesomest self when you're traveling. So just a reminder that the point of all of your goals is to feel good. And the point of having grit is to push through the obstacles that are getting in the way of you achieving your goals and experiencing that self-evolution that's going to make you feel so good. And the point of all the woo-woo mindset stuff is to redirect your brain towards thoughts that make you feel good. So you can catch yourself when your brain comes up with some bullshit like, oh, I'm too old, or oh, I can't afford it. And instead, you start cultivating thoughts like, I wonder how I could make this happen. And when you get into that mindset of possibility and curiosity, that's when magic happens, my friend. And a part of the magic that you want to create for your life includes extended traveling with your family. I just want to remind you that it might be way less expensive than you think, and you might be way more resourceful financially than you think. 2, you can totally make sure that your kids get exactly the kind of education that you want for them. There's a whole world of education opportunities outside the school that they currently go to. And even if that is the best thing for them, they can absolutely keep up while on the road. 3, you can stay healthy and have an amazing time and enjoy your trip at the same time. You can keep up with your strength training and your healthy eating, and you might even rediscover a new love of movement because instead of grinding it out at the Stairmaster at a big box gym, you're surfing and swimming and hiking and logging 10,000 steps at a haunted walking tour of Venice, which I think is way the fuck more fun. And dude, if you listen to this episode and if at some point you heard yourself think, oh, yeah, but examine it. Examine the yeah, but that is your limiting belief. And it is such a great opportunity to just see if it stands up to scrutiny. Or send me a DM and tell me your yeah, but, and I will throw it back in your face. No, I'm just kidding. I will send you any resources I know that will help you with your yeah, but. Or, of course, you can DM me and say that this episode already cleared up all of those limiting beliefs and that you are planning your trip right now. Either way, I would love to hear from you. Oh, and speaking of busting limiting beliefs, next week, we are talking about menopause metabolism and whether women should be psyching their workouts with their menstrual cycle. You are not going to want to miss this one. All right, I'll chat with you then. Bye. Hey, dude, thanks for listening. If you like this episode, make sure you're subscribed so you can get the next one. And by the way, if you rate and review this podcast, it really helps me get found by other people who need some goals, grit, and some woo-woo shit. And be sure to connect and DM me at Una Duncan on Instagram and let me know what you thought of the episode. Chat soon.